Bill Gates once famously said, "Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. The sentiment being that while in the short term we may aim high and underachieve, incremental steps towards a larger outcome mean that our achievements long term can be astronomical. I find this premise extremely encouraging and resounding support for the value of goal setting. Undoubtedly, you've come across the idea of setting goals before, whether in the classroom, club room, or at work, and maybe you've actually practiced goal setting yourself. Similarly, you have likely been exposed to the concept of SMART goals, and maybe you've created a few either to attempt to better yourself or in an attempt to appease your demanding health teacher at school. There is, however, a potential dilemma with blindly developing SMART goals, and I think Anthony Grant put it well in his 2012 research paper published in the International Coaching Psychology Review. The use of SMART goals without a clear underpinning of knowledge may result in ill-informed decision-making and the cultivation of inaccurate practice doctrines and mythologies about goals and goal theory. The sentiment here being, well, SMART goals are an effective way to pinpoint what you should aim to put in your goals. If you don't understand the function of those elements or why they're there, it might actually be holding back the value of using them. So with that in mind, today I'd like to explore why we set goals and what is their value. How can you set goals with consideration to the components important in goal setting, but also why these components are important? In my personal view, goal setting provides three main benefits that promote better living: motivation, aspiration, and accountability. This is a somewhat simplified list of the goal mechanisms outlined by Locke and colleagues, those being directive function, energizing function, persistence, and indirect action. What is important to acknowledge is that while Locke's research spans over 5 decades, with a formal concrete theory established in 1990, it has a primary focus on organizational goal setting, that is, goals in the corporate landscape. As such, their relevancy pertains more specifically to work-related achievement, and in fact, perhaps maybe even more so relevant to a manager setting goals for subordinates, rather than goal setting at an individual level. I like to think motivation, aspiration, and accountability accurately acknowledge these mechanisms with a bit more of an individualized focus. In terms of motivation, we can consider the impact of goal setting on personal drive. When we set goals, we indirectly outline our desires. Inherently, goals represent something that we hope to achieve, and so I would argue that they are inextricably linked to motivations. So what does having a goal do to motivation compared to not having a goal? That is, does having a goal act as a catalyst to more motivation? Well, research indicates that this is the case. The fundamental concept of Locke's goal theory is that when people are committed to achieving their goals, they are more motivated and more productive. Setting goals tends to be associated with higher levels of intrinsic motivation, that is, motivation from within, which is in turn linked to improved performance. The effect of goals on motivation isn't limited to the goal itself. In fact, motivation requires a sequential feed forward as well as feedback. That is, after people attain the goal that they have been pursuing, they generally set a higher goal for themselves. What is reflected then is the power of goals to not only motivate us during, but also beyond the goal as well. By aspiration, I'm referring to the idea of things that we desire to have or achieve. There are a lot of hypothetical yous that could theoretically exist in the future. Maybe one of you is an Olympian, maybe one of you has total financial security. Regardless, by setting goals, I believe that we begin to specify the hypotheticals that we truly aspire to have. For example, there are many interests that I like to engage with, both frequently and far more scarcely. But by setting actionable goals, which is a directive to pursue some of these hobbies further, I have in essence specified the future me that I aspire to be. I have made a value judgment about the areas I hope to grow in and therefore aspire towards. Goals serve a directive function away from irrelevant activities and specifically onto relevant ones. This effect occurs both in our thoughts and behavior. So what we can consider from this is that when we turn our hopes and desires into objectives by outlining goals, we are more able to hone in and define what it is we aspire to do. For this reason, I believe goal setting is invaluable for defining your aspirations in life. Finally, accountability. When executed correctly, setting goals provides us with an objective expectation we can impose on ourselves. To quote Matsuya Okada and Inoshita as referenced in Locke's paper, for goals to be effective, people need summary feedback that reveals progress in relation to their goals. If they do not know how they are doing, it is difficult or impossible for them to adjust the level or direction of their effort or to adjust their performance strategies to match what the goal requires. If the goal is to cut down 30 trees in a day, people have no way to tell if they are on target unless they know how many trees have been cut. When people find that they are below target, they normally increase their effort. Once again, while the premise of this quote has an occupational focus for setting clear tasks for feedback, the premise is generalizable to your own personal goals. You can aspire to be stronger, and this might motivate you to go to the gym more, but without objectively specifying the goal that you have in mind, it is difficult to be accountable to that goal. If instead you know how much weight you want to lift by a certain date, you will objectively know whether or not you have reached that goal, and therefore are far more accountable to it. So how do we go about setting goals? Well, with the three concepts that I outlined in mind, what we can say for certain is that our goals should reflect our aspirations and motivations and force us to be accountable. Therefore, in my opinion, there are primary conditions a goal must meet. A goal must be quantified, the goal should stem from your desires, and the goal should be actionable. In other words, your goals should have a measurable outcome. They should be things you actually want to achieve and not things you think you should achieve, and you should be able to practically work towards them. So some examples of bad goals would be grow 6 inches taller, be faster, improve my drawing skills. The issue there with these sort of goals is that they fail to meet all three of the objectives we've outlined. So how do we go about making your goals? Well, here's my advice based on what I personally do. When setting goals for yourself, I find it most effective to establish a time frame. So I sit down and think to myself, in 1 year's time, what does my life look like? Where will I be and what will I have achieved? I consider my work life, my personal life, my extracurricular activities, anything I want to see improvement in. From there, I attempt to make a clear checklist of questions that I currently would have the answer being no to, but would hopefully say yes as the answer in a year's time. So for example, one of the goals I might have set myself last year would be to lose a certain weight. The question when setting the goal is, am I at this weight? The answer would inherently be no, but hopefully in a year's time that answer would become yes. These questions are indirectly the actual goals themselves in question form. So what you want to do is make sure that they follow the basic tenets we outlined before, quantified, stemming from a desire, and actionable. Another thing that I think is worth appreciating is that not all goals have to be a linear progression. For example, booking a trip or getting a tattoo. Goals don't necessarily have to be dimensional in improvement. They can be categorical. In fact, if you consider your goals at a macro level year on year, some of these categorical achievements can actually become dimensional and progressive. For example, maybe year 1 the goal was to get a tattoo, but by year 10 the goal is to have 20 tattoos, with a progressively increasing aspiration year on year. One last consideration is how high you should aim. Revisiting the initial quote from the top of this video, many people overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year. I think this is important to keep in mind in trying to not be so hard on yourself and expect huge changes in 1 year. However, research has also highlighted the value of self-efficacy, that is, an individual's personal belief in their own capacity to perform behaviours to achieve tasks. When goals are self-set, people with high self-efficacy set higher goals than do people with lower self-efficacy. They are also more committed to assigned goals, find and use better task strategies to attain the goals, and respond more positively to negative feedback than do people with low self-efficacy. What this reflects is the value of self-belief in the pursuit of goal achievement. Therefore, I think it is important to seek out goals that do not ask too much of yourself, but do not underplay your abilities either. One of the techniques that might be helpful, albeit relevant to specific goal types, is to look at your performance in the year prior. For example, if you put away $10,000 in the last year, you can try to do better the year after with respect to the standard you were at that year before. So if it was $10,000, you might then aim to put away $12,000 in the following year. The idea here is to motivate yourself to be better than you were before, but with consideration of what you can reasonably achieve. Finally, if you aim to set your goals on an annual basis, I'd advise picking a time of the year when you are already in the swing of things. There is often this trope of setting goals at the start of the year as like a New Year's resolution. I think the issue with this is that we are often away on holidays and our point of reference of time and resources is a little skewed. I personally set my goals along with the new financial year, so the 1st of July in Australia, as this way the year is well underway and the goals that I have set better reflect life during the working year as opposed to when I have had time off. In the spirit of accountability, I will openly express that one of my goals this period is to publish 10 videos to this channel. Hopefully this gives me the extra push to achieve the goal. However, I wouldn't recommend openly expressing all your goals publicly. First of all, I think this encourages us to be less vulnerable about the goals we set, as there's that public expectation. But furthermore, research suggests that publicly announcing your goals can actually backfire against you and give you a false sense of success. This happens as a result of the identity you hope to develop within your achieved goal. So when you begin to speak about these goals to other people, you are shaping the perspective of who you are and what you have done as a result. And therefore you will run the risk of feeling as though you have already achieved the goal just by expressing a desire to do so. In other words, by telling people where you aspire to be, you develop a narrative that you are already there. So maybe it's best to keep your goals to yourself, at least until you've achieved them.